Speaker, in 2019, this August House passed the Right to Information Act, Act 989, and the President, Nana Addo Akufo-Addo, promptly assented to it when it was brought to his attention for assent. The law's full implementation began in 2020, and we have made a lot of progress thus far. This House may recall that on the 30th of June 2021, I presented the Maiden RTI annual report before it. Mr. Speaker, from the time the implementation of the law commenced to date, our provisional data shows that a total of 223 RTI requests have been received so far by public institutions. And with your permission, I'd like to provide a year-by-year breakdown of these requests. In the year 2020, 85 requests for information were made by individuals and institutions and received by 32 public institutions. Out of the 85 applications, 34 were submitted by individuals, 36 by institutions, and for the outstanding 15, we are making efforts to get clarity from the ministries, departments, and agencies that received them, whether or not they were submitted by individuals or by institutions. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, although I'm yet to present the annual report for the year in accordance with the Act, permit me to brief members on the interim figures that we have gathered so far. I must emphasize that these are provisional figures. The final figures will be laid before this House by June 2022 in accordance with the Act. A total of 129 requests for information were submitted by individuals and institutions and received by 47 public institutions. Out of the 129 applications received, 87 were received from individuals and 42 from institutions. Speaker, I'll move to the year 2022. Thus far, a total of 10 requests for information have been submitted by individuals and institutions and received by 7 public institutions as at the end of January 2022. Out of the 10 applications received, 5 were from individuals, 5 from institutions. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity. On this basis, for those that were asked to pay some amount of money, the sums mostly ranged between 1 and 2 cedis per page for the reproduction of the information. In some instances where some high figures were suggested by the institutions, the applicants appealed to the RTI Commission, and the RTI Commission gave the appropriate orders to review those fees downwards. But Mr. Speaker, we are before this House that the fees and charges schedule for the current year be approved to include the charges for RTI so that all of these discrepancies can be resolved. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So the public institutions are turned away sometimes by your information officers. The reason being that they do not address their applications or requests to the heads of the institutions. How would you educate the public as to who must receive the application, who the addressees must be? Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, once again, I thank you for the opportunity. Respectfully, I would disagree with my colleague if he says that most applicants are turned away. The data as we have it suggests that an overwhelming majority are actually granted. But Mr. Speaker, in accordance with sections 19 and 84 of the Act, applications are supposed to be made to the information officer. And information officer includes the officer of the public institution assigned or designated for the purpose. The head of institution is an appellate officer who comes in to respond to an appeal if the initial determination is not satisfactory to the applicant. Therefore, we very often discourage an application directly to the head of institution and in some instances encourage the applicant to reapply directly, if I may borrow this expression, to the point of first instance, so that if there's need for an appeal, then the head of institution will come in to respond to the appeal. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Independent observers have made some remarks or reports about the implementation of the Act. But you are telling us, or you are giving us, a very rosy picture about the implementation of the Act. How do you reconcile this? Thank you.
First, let me commend civil society organizations in particular that have made it a point to test the system by applying for information at various ministries, departments, and agencies. And with your permission, let me mention, for example, the Media Foundation for West Africa and the Fourth Estate that have done a lot of these applications. Mr. Speaker, we, from our end, have reached out to these civil society organizations to furnish us with copies of some of these surveys that they have done and to attend upon an invitation with us at the ministry so that we can understand what they are also realizing, which we may not be privy to, and reconcile anything that they may have with what we are officially gathering. But the information that I am providing to the House this morning is the official information from the RTI officers at the various ministries, departments, and agencies who have been recruited and posted there, and then those who have been designated to play this function at other ministries, departments, and agencies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I want to find out from the minister that indeed 223 applications were received from the various individuals and institutions. I want to find out from the minister how many of these 223 has been responded to and with the information that was needed to the various applicants and institutions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the year 2020, 72 of the applications were granted, 6 were rejected, 3 were transferred, 3 were referred, 1 was deferred. For the year 2021, 95 applications were granted, 7 rejected, 6 transferred, 17 referred, 2 deferred, and 2 reviewed. And for the year 2022 so far, out of the 10 that have been received, 8 have already been granted, 1 has been rejected, and 1 has been referred to the appropriate ministry, department, or agency to respond to it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, a careful look at the responses given by the Minister of Information would show that in 2020, an average of 22 requests were made in every quarter. In 2021, the figures show that an average of 32 requests were made in each quarter. In 2022, we are almost about finishing the first quarter of 2022, but so far we've had only 10 requests. It shows some form of reduction in activism or an attempt to make requests to the RTI Commission. Do you have any reasons, or would you be able to tell us what may account for that reduction when you do the year-on-year comparison? Thank you.
The of RTI implementation in other jurisdictions shows that in the very first year, you have attempts to test the system. And so often in the very first year, you have a very high number of applications. And this dwindles sometimes over the period. That may explain why in the very first quarter of implementation, there was such a high request. But Mr. Speaker, I agree with my colleague on the other side that for all the amount of money that has been spent, all the hours of executive and parliamentary time has been spent in legislating on the RTI, it's a bit disappointing that even in subsequent years, these are the very few numbers of requests that have come through. We on our part consider we need to do a lot of public education and advocacy to get a lot more people aware that the RTI Act is in full operation and you can access it. The RTI Commission is charged by law to lead the public education. We have had cause to draw their attention to the fact that they also need to step up on their public education so that a lot more awareness is created. But Mr. Speaker, may I take advantage of the opportunity here to also reach out to the entire country, particularly the academic community. A lot of our young people have complained about difficulties in getting access to information when preparing their dissertations, etc., because a lot of institutions sometimes operate as though they are doing you a favor. The RTI Act gives you legal cover to apply for information from public institutions for purposes of academic exercises and dissertations. So may I take advantage of this to also reach out particularly to the academic community to make use of the Act to apply for information from public institutions. Also to our colleagues in the media, Mr. Speaker, we want to encourage a lot more use of the RTI Act and a lot less resort to speculation and hearsay. The RTI Act grounds you to, by law, get access to information for purposes of media work as well. So while conceding that the numbers have not been very exciting as compared to all the time and money we've spent on passing the RTI Act, may I encourage various stakeholders to employ the Act to access information. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to ask, out of curiosity, what the interest areas have been based on the data that you have shared with us. If you can expatiate on that for me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I have a bit of data on that to share with my colleague, the Honourable Member on the other side. Mr. Speaker, in 2020, for example, 24 of the requests that we received focused on the economic sector or on the economy, ministries, departments, and agencies associated with the economy. 22 of them were on public safety. 21 of them were on the social services sector, 10 of them on the administrative sector, that is the Attorney General's Department, Information Ministry, and the other administrative sectors, and 8 of them were focused on the infrastructure sector, roads and related sectors. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, 51 of the requests were focused on the economy, or the ministries, departments, and agencies associated with the economy. So ministries of finance and trade, energy, and those related ministries. 29 of them were focused on the infrastructure sector, 27 of them on the administrative sector, 19 of them on the social services sector. And Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, 2022 is still ongoing. We're just around the first quarter. And so we'll do well to share the data by the time I appear before the House to present that formal information. Thank you.
What's the average response time? I'm asking this because it appears there seems to be a delay with a lot of responses, or some of the responses, because Fourth Estate, for instance, requested an information from Ministry of Local Government in September of 2022. They've done a follow-up. They're yet to receive any response. And also in August of 2020, they wrote to the Ministry of Education requesting information on the COVID spraying. After a year, they got a response that that information would be with the presidency. They did a follow-up with the presidency. Presidency came back after a whole year again, saying that that information would be with the Ghana Education Service. So I want to find out what's the average response time for people who make requests for information. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the Act, there are timelines for various types of information requests. Information that doesn't border on security and does not border on personal security of individuals, for example, is supposed to be provided within 14 days. Or a response to it is supposed to be made available in 14 days. And that response will communicate, for example, the charge associated with it and the form through which that information will be made available. On other kinds of information that are of a pressing nature, there's a 48-hour window on it. Mr. Speaker, to the best of my knowledge, these timelines have as much as possible been complied with. The law envisages that it is possible that the information officer in a particular institution may not respond in time and may not alert us that he or she has not responded in time. And so the law has made room that when the timelines are missed, the applicant ought to consider it as having been denied and trigger the appeal process thereon to ensure that it is delivered within time. The specific examples that my colleague cites, I would have to acquaint myself with it, but my word out there will be that if the timelines are missed, the law requires you to consider it as information that has been denied, and if you are not satisfied with it, to quickly appeal to the head of institution. If you are not satisfied with that within the timelines, appeal to the RTI Commission. Mr. Speaker, the Commission has shown a lot of resilience in taking some very firm and tough decisions against ministries, departments, and agencies that have not complied. And I'd like to commend the Executive Secretary and the Board of the Commission for showing fidelity with the Act. And so I want to encourage any person who has reason to feel that timelines have been delayed should take advantage of the provision of the Act that says consider it as denied and appeal to the head of institution or the Commission to get redress immediately. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just a request from to the minister. Now that people are finding it difficult to know who to address, can we just develop a template in one page, which would clearly state the right person to address, maybe leave a place for the dates and other things, so that some of the questions will be tick box, and then maybe put it online and the information offices of the disassembly. So it lessens the thinking of the ordinary person what to put on the letter. I think that will also help people in my constituency a lot. Would you consider that, Mrs.
My good friend, that not only will or have we considered that, we've actually implemented that. So at every public institution, there is a template for applying for information, which simplifies the request that is being made in accordance with the requirements of the Act. And we encourage applicants to, as much as possible, adopt that template so that it makes it very easy for them. That same template is also being made available online. I'll perhaps share with the table office the URL so that those who intend to apply online can do so. Mr. Speaker, we are also in the process through the Access to Information Division of the Information Services Department. We're in the process of rolling out an online records management system, which then allows the websites of all ministries, departments, and agencies to have a tab for requesting for information, which request can be filled online and then sent directly to the RTI officer at the ministry, department, or agency to respond to it. And these are some of the measures we are taking to make it easier for people to apply for information. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Information being requested for is the punitive fees being charged. Thank you.
Yes.
It would be incorrect to say that the reason for less information being requested for is a punitive fees being charged, because as I've explained to the House, majority of the grants that have been done have been on gratis basis at no cost to the applicant. A good number of them have been between about 1 CD, 2 CD for the reproduction, per page for the reproduction. Admittedly, there's been, I think, 1 or 2 instances in which some very high figures were proposed by the agencies, and the applicants quickly resorted to the RTI Commission, and the Commission ruled that those figures were a bit high and actually recommended the right figures. There's no data to suggest that people are not applying because of the free or the 1 or 2 CDs or because of that one isolated incident. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the data available, which I've shared with this House, shows that there have been more grants than rejections. As I mentioned, in 2020, 20 grants as against 6 rejections, and in subsequent years, similar data, 95 grants in 2021 as against 7 rejections, and in 2022 so far, 8 grants as against 1 rejection. So again, the data does not support the claim that there are a lot of rejections or that majority of the applications are being rejected, which may lead somebody to say that that may be, even though my colleague didn't say that, that may be a reason for which people may not be applying. I think we will concede that a lot more public education needs to take place by the Commission, by the Access to Information Division of the Information Services Department, indeed by the Communications Committee, so that for all the money we have spent on passing RTI, all the executive and legislative hours we have spent on debating it clause by clause, all the 17 years it went through, not only 223 requests should be received, but a lot more people will take advantage of it. And I've already mentioned that we're encouraging journalists, persons in the academic community to, as much as possible, take advantage of this act to apply for information. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The breakdown of the rejections. Can you share with this House some data on the breakdown of the rejections? Do we have a situation where majority are on on national security grounds? Because some analysts are raising concern about the national security window being used probably to reject requests from the general public. So do you have the breakdown of the rejection, the reasons given for those rejections?
There's been an overwhelming grant of the requests that come in. It's just in few cases that rejections have taken place. But I will do well to furnish the table office with the deep dive of the reasons for the very few rejections that have taken place so far. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.